the Imperium.
Hello and welcome to Ashes of the Imperium. My name is Dan, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, Valentina, otherwise known as Gretchin on Instagram. Welcome to the show, Valentina.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Not at all. It's a pleasure. Ever since seeing your work on Instagram, I've wanted to have you on the show. And the first thing I saw was your amazing Drukhari. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. Are they peonies or like the pink Drukhari flyer?
Yeah, the Dark Eld hearts. I believe that was a. Yeah.
Love it. And like, not only is it a very striking color, but also like the freehand that you've done on that is phenomenal. So I thought, what an excellent guest for the podcast. We've got a bunch of questions. Going to talk a little bit about your hobby journey and your hobby highlights. But do you want to kind of just introduce yourself to the show?
Yeah, sure. My name is Valentina. I'm better known as Gretchin on Instagram and TikTok. I just started hobbying in 2019 over COVID, or I guess 2020. 2020. Yeah. Because that's when COVID started.
It's all a blur, isn't it? That kind of neck of the woods.
Oh my gosh. We lost like 2 years there. So I've only been hobbying for a couple of years. It's been a lot of fun, and I do commission painting, and I do some paint judging at events. And I've been running a couple of fun after-hours events for wargaming tournaments as well.
Awesome. So jumping in from starting the hobby in 2019 and straight into commission painting is it's quite a steep or rapid journey. Is that something you always thought you would have you always been quite arty and wanted to do something professionally in art, or did you just kind of get caught along with the ride?
Well, I mean, I grew up in the arts, so it's never really been a conscious decision. But I have a really bad habit of trying to turn all of my hobbies into businesses. Because who wouldn't want to do their hobby instead of their job forever? So that was kind of it just sort of happened. Over COVID, my boyfriend introduced me to the painting, and it was so much fun. And then I had to pick a faction. And after he explained, orc color theory and their mind powers, I was kind of hooked on that idea. And then as I started painting them, he was like, "Why don't you post these on social media?" And I'm to be honest, I am really bad with posting personal things on social media. And so I was like, okay, but like, I don't want, it's just going to be my minis. I'm just going to post pictures of my minis to see if people like them, if this is something that like I should even do. And it just sort of took off from there. Our local game store asked if I could like paint some white scars for them, and then some Crute, and then the Tower Rangers, and it's sort of just after posting those online, people just decided to start asking me to paint their minis.
Awesome. And like going from something that started as a hobby into like a business, you said you've done that before. Have you got other side hustles?
I've tried unsuccessfully for the most part. Yeah, this is I've never. Yeah, it's always it's always a fun idea to. Like, what if I didn't have to go to work anymore and I could just do this, and that would be it? That's just kind of my drive and my motivation. And so far, it's like a lot of people kind of get demotivated by doing that with their hobby, and I completely understand. But I guess I'm kind of the opposite regarding that. Like the more I have of work coming in, and the more I get to do this hobby, the easier it is for me to live life and the happier I am. So
that's cool. I like that. And also I've got a huge amount of respect for anyone that is self-employed / self-starter, because for me, like the structure and processes of working for someone and the accountability is definitely something that I need. So I think I look at people like yourself. So this is something you do. Is this your full-time job?
Hopefully soon. I also work as a photographer, and we do a lot of action photography and events photography. We're actually kind of doing that in the hobby as well now. I'm going to real quick shout out Small Hammer. That's my boyfriend's business as well, where we go to different tournaments, wargaming tournaments, and he takes photos there and professional photos of those miniatures. So between those two, yeah, that's basically full time now.
Amazing. Yeah, like I've got a lot of time for that, a lot of respect for that, and something I could never do myself. And I've seen a few posts on Instagram of paint and sip as well. Is that something that you came up with, or tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the idea kind of came, we were trying to figure out a couple of like after hours events to do at one of the tournaments we were attending. And I was paint judging, but I was also kind of like, there are a lot of people who show up to tournaments who don't have their armies fully painted yet. And they're all sitting separately in their little hotel rooms trying to like speed paint the rest of their army for the following day. And I was like, why don't we just have an event where people can come and paint their minis together, have like a glass of wine or two, and just relax and talk about the hobby and ask for any advice or any critique from each other. So that's kind of where it originated. And hopefully we can keep it going at the next event and the next event and the next event.
That sounds cool. I have always, I remember like way back when I was first started to get into 40k tournaments, and I always remembered like we came up with the idea, me and sort of the gaming group that I was in at the time, and we were like, what if this like event was actually more of an experience? So rather than just like turning up, and in the UK we have I don't know whether you have this over in the US, but we have travel lodges, which is like a really crappy budget hotel, and it's a kind of tournament staple to like stay in your travel lodge hotel, painting your miniatures, like, you know, using the crappy little hairdryer that you get to try and like, you know, make the Grella Nerf crack in time for the next day. And we were just talking about like how rather than just like staying in a rubbish hotel and eating like fast food and turning up for your games, what if it was more of like an experience? And I think there's definitely like a subsect of like perhaps event goers who would be willing to pay a little bit more to have like a dinner or wine and like gaming and like just like actual normal adult things, as well as like toy soldiers as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's kind of what I've been discussing lately with one of our big tournament organizers. They're called Wicked Dicey. They host many events, but I think the most prominent ones that I'm involved with are Ironweld, which we were just at, and Everwinter, which is in the winter in Boston. And that's kind of our goal. And so, spoiler alert, I'm partnering with Wicked Dicey to kind of bring some after hours events to their tournaments, which include the Paint and Sip. And this past event, we ran a really cool social deduction game inspired by Two Rooms in a Boom, which is a huge social deduction game for like between 20 to 50 people. And I rewrote it and we reflavored it to be the Horus Heresy. And it was great. It was a lot of fun. It was fantastic. So we're going to be doing that again for Everwinter.
Awesome.
With a pizza party.
With a pizza, I mean, anything with pizza is obviously automatically better. But yeah, Warhammer and pizza is a great combo. And in terms of events yourself, like, have you got any highlights? Have you been to any events that you think like that was the best thing ever, or anything you're looking forward to going to soon?
Honestly, the Two Rooms Horus Heresy was was probably the highlight, because everybody we started running it at, I want to say 10 p.m. and people left around 2 a.m. the day before the second round of their games, and everybody was drunk, and it was so much fun. So that's been kind of the highlight for me personally, because most of the events I go to, I'm a paint judge, so I don't really participate in the tournaments. But it's really cool. One of my favorite things for these events is going and getting to see everybody's army, and not just looking at the armies, but getting to talk to the people and ask about the decision-making process that went into the colors that they chose and the way they made their bases and the way they made their dioramas. And everybody's always so excited to talk about it. And it doesn't matter whether their army is well painted or not. Everybody is excited to talk about the inspiration that went into this hobby for them, and I think that's really great.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like people don't pick, well, unless you are literally just taking this like a maths game, but people don't tend to pick armies that they're not passionate about in some capacity, whether it's the lore or models or like the way they play, like listening to people tell their own personal journey with an army, especially if it's something that they've like always been into. Maybe that's recently got a new batch of releases, like for example, like Steve, like he's huge into his Sisters of Battle, and when they released that like a massive wave of new plastics for him, it was just like such a moment in his hobby that yeah, it's always good to hear people talk passionately about stuff they're passionate about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people don't really get to talk about a lot of the stuff that they talk about when they go to these tournaments, which is why they're so unique and so prominent and growing every year, which is very exciting.
It's good for the soul. Good for the soul. So tell us a little bit about the social deduction game. So, 2 Rooms and a Boom isn't something that I'm familiar with, and this was rebranded as 2 Sanctums and a Heresy, right?
Yes. So 2 Rooms and a Boom originally is a mega social deduction game that is live. So it's not like Werewolf where everybody kind of talks, but there are phases and then like you have to stay silent and some people get murdered in the night or whatever. It is a game that runs for between 30 to 40 minutes, depending on how the game runners want to do it. The original game is called 2 Rooms and a Boom because you get, say, 40 people, you split them into 2 different rooms. Everybody gets a secret card that is either red or blue with a role on it. The most important role for the blue team is the president, and the most important role for the red team is the bomber.
Okay.
At the end of the game, the blue team wins if the... Oh, and then like every few minutes, each room exchanges 4 hostages.
Gotcha.
So at the end of the game, blue team wins if the president and the bomber are in 2 separate rooms. And the red team wins if the bomber and the president are in the same room.
Okay.
So we took that, and then there are just, everybody gets their own role, and there are different roles that mess with the mechanics of the game. But basically that's like how... the basics of how it's run. So naturally, for 2 Sanctums and a Heresy, we had the Emperor of Mankind and the War Master as the bomber.
Amazing.
Yes. It was a lot of fun.
That sounds so cool.
The game is divided into 5 rounds that usually last 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, and then 1 minute. And after each round, the elected leader of each room gets to choose 4 hostages, 3 hostages, 2 hostages, 1 hostage, and then 1 hostage to send over to the other room, and they exchange. It's timed, and everybody can just like walk around and talk to each other, and they can choose to share their color or share their whole role. And there are like different cards in the game where, for example, there's a card that looks red, but if you reveal the role, it's actually a blue spy.
Wow, this sounds really cool.
Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna have to try
Yeah,
something
come to
like
Boston.
this. Oh yeah, just hop on a plane. Absolutely, yeah, give it a go. That sounds cool.
Well, hey, maybe I'll come to the UK.
Absolutely, come and run one of the big UK events over here. I think it'll go down a storm.
I would love to.
So, moving on to your hobby, you're obviously a fan of orcs, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about orcs in general. But you've got some pretty striking schemes. How would you describe your approach to hobby?
So my approach to hobbying was I just sort of picked up a paintbrush and started painting. But the main reason I started painting orcs was because when I was trying to choose a faction, because my boyfriend was like, "Okay, I've given you like a couple of Space Marines to paint, but we need to get you your own minis." I was like, "Okay." I was like, what if, I don't know what colors to pick. Like, I don't want to just do red. This is a lot of minis. Like, they all have to match. How do I? And he explained orc color theory to me, which is, for those unfamiliar, that orcs have psychic powers, and they believe that colors have specific powers that they can grant whatever and whoever is painted in them. For example,
red ones
go
do
faster.
go faster. Absolutely.
Right. Yellow is yeah. So you understand. And so I was like, but what if I use all the colors?
Purple and red, they're both fast and sneaky.
Right, yes. But then a couple of grots in, I got really tired of trying to do the whole like base layer, line work, heavy metal technique. And I was like, you know what? No, that's it. So I just started like color blocking each color and then null oiling it like heavily, and then just doing the edge highlight with the same color, and it turned out great. And then people were talking about how it looks kind of like a mall rat vibe, and so they became the Boys R Us boys who raided a Toys R Us and now have toy weapons that they use.
That's amazing. And I think the absolute kind of pièce de la résistance of it all was your skateboarding Gazgul Thraka.
Yeah, that was fun.
He's very cool.
I don't know what to say about that. I just
I think it kind of it doesn't need introduction, doesn't need anything, doesn't need comment. It's Gansgul Thraka on a skateboard. What more could you want?
Gaskula Thrasher, technically.
That's it. Absolutely. Yeah, my bad, of course. Approaching the hobby with absolute bucket loads of Nuln Oil, are there any favorite paints or products that you like to use that you find using quite a lot in your armies?
Yes. So I would say my favorite paint, just in general, because I think it's gorgeous, and I'm trying to learn how to use it more in my paint schemes, but it's kind of difficult. Is Screaming Bell. it's
kind of like bronzy tin color, is it?
Yeah, it's kind of like a pinky metal brown. It's wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah. And then my I would say an undervalued tool that I think a lot of people overlook is having a good lamp with good lighting. I would say that's probably the most important hobby tool. You can have, crappy brushes. You can try to use a paper towel as a palette, but having good lighting to see what you're painting is probably the most important thing.
Yeah, I remember I forked out quite a bit for one of those big, long, white LED things. It's fantastic. It's so good to just be able to see properly when you're painting.
Yeah.
Although one thing I think is important is that sometimes when you've got like really bright light, quite harsh, stark daylight shining down on a model, and you take a picture of it, stick it on Twitter or Instagram, whatever, and it's so easy to like criticize yourself, to be like, oh, that's not the heavy metal model that I thought it was in my head. I often have to kind of remind myself that I'm not painting for display, or I'm not painting for competitions, I'm painting an army. It doesn't matter that this one model looks a little bit, ropey under very harsh light and a white background, because actually when it's in Warhammer world and the light's all yellow anyway, not white, and you've got a whole army that looks the same, like that's what's important, certainly to me. But that's because I'm a kind of like hobby narrative gamer that is less fussed about painting in a specific style. Obviously for yourself as a commission painter, and that's very different, but that's something that I have to kind of keep reminding myself when I look at my own pictures.
Yeah, no, that's definitely one of the biggest pieces of advice I also give people, is that if you do have good lighting, turn it off every once in a while and look at your minis, because probably the only problem with having good lighting is that you can paint all of these different shades of the grim dark, browns and everything, but when you actually put it on a tabletop, you can't see any of them because it's dark. So that's another thing to think about as well, because you can't really see your army in the yellow Warhammer world light. Neither can anybody else.
Yeah.
So sometimes painting in the dark is good, because then you kind of paint up, you highlight more. So it's just good to have a good balance, but having access to good lighting is very important.
I sometimes see like Warhammer painting, in my mind, it's kind of like stage makeup. You can, we're talking about like, strong lights and white backgrounds and stuff, and when you put it on social media, yeah, absolutely, your kind of chunky highlights can look a bit maybe. Not yours, clearly, but maybe mine. But what one's highlights can look a bit clumsy, but actually a bit like stage makeup. When you see someone wearing a full face of stage makeup, you're thinking like, what on earth's going on? But then when you're 50 meters away watching them from the seats, it doesn't look weird. But actually, all the kind of over the top like accents work. And I think the same can be sometimes said for Warhammer models. That it's just like, it doesn't matter that the transition's not as smooth as anything. It doesn't matter that your highlights aren't super razor thin and sharp, because again, people aren't necessarily always looking at your miniatures, depending on what you're painting for. Of course, people aren't always looking at miniatures from 3 inches away. They're looking at a table, right?
Right, exactly. And if they are looking close, then you're if you are painting to be paint judged, you're already past the point of knowing where to put highlights and how bright to do them. But if you're, this is what I like to tell like beginner intermediate painters, is learn brush control and learn the color wheel, and learn where to put highlights and how hot to make them before you even, it doesn't matter how clumpy they are. It doesn't matter whether it looks good or not. If you learn to like actually look and see the differences, that will help you so much, and you will move much faster.
That's really good advice, actually. I like that. Are there any? One of the questions I've got written down here is, what's your least favorite bit of painting advice, or like a cliche that you don't like? So, for example, for me, it's people saying like, "Oh, dry brushing is for terrain only, or terrain and bases," whereas actually dry brushing can be used on any, dry brushing can be used on a display model if you're using it, in the right way. Is there any bits of painting advice or kind of old hacks that you can't stand?
A couple. One of them would probably be the question, how many layers of paint did you use? As a means of determining whether a paint job is good or not. Mainly because I am of the strong belief that it doesn't matter how many paints you use as long as it looks good, and that there are paint jobs where you can literally use 2 colors and it'll look fantastic. And there are paint jobs where you use 20 colors and it can look fantastic. And the number of times you put one paint over the other has nothing to do with the quality of the paint job. Another one, and this one really gets me.
I feel like we've touched the nerve here. There's now Val's least favorite paint advice.
No, there's just two. There's how many paints did you use, or how many layers of paint did you use, and how long did that take to paint? And this one is a little bit controversial, but it's probably my least favorite cliche question, because you can spend 30 plus hours painting one mini, and it could still look like shit. And you could do an amazing paint job in like 2 hours. And the amount of time it took you to paint something should not determine whether it's good or not.
Yeah,
absolutely. And the time investment that you put into learning how to make art efficiently is way more important than the time investment into like each thing you paint. So I would say spend time learning new techniques and perfecting skills rather than being stuck seeing how long it'll take you to paint this mini.
Rather than saying like, how long did it take you to paint that one model? You could turn around and be like, oh, it took an hour, but I spent 30 hours painting the same model 30 times, an hour at a time, learning something different. And actually, the time, or how long did that take you to paint a model? Well, it took me 20 years to learn to paint this good, because you've been painting, to paint this good, to paint this well, because every single model you paint is just like the next journey of your hobby, the next stage of your hobby journey, and you're hopefully always learning and always developing as a hobbyist. So it doesn't necessarily matter that this one model took you a couple of hours, because all the hours and hours and hours and hours that you put into previous models have provided you the foundation to succeed on this specific like display winning kind of golden demon model, right?
Right, exactly. And I think what people actually mean when they're asking how long did that take to paint is how long did it take you to learn how to do that? But that's not what they're asking. So if you say like 10 years,
people are like, but this model's only been out for 2 years, and you'd be like, yeah, I believe in proper prior planning and preparation.
I've been waiting for this model.
So any additional advice that you'd give to people like trying to improve their painting, apart from learn where to put highlights and learn about theory?
Yeah. I mean, it would really depend on what people's skills currently are. I would say first learn brush control and how to mix paints, and maybe buy a wet palette or learn to make. I'm going to be releasing a video soon on how to make like a super cheap wet palette for those of you who don't want to spend $20. It's fine. For intermediate painters, I would say learn more about color cohesion and what makes certain minis look better than others regarding lighting if they're using the same colors. And then I would also say if you're like a pretty good painter, and this is what I tell people during painting competitions and stuff like that who are asking like, what could I do to make my army be better, to be like in a higher category, to be in competition with the top painters, is get out of your comfort zone and as much as you possibly can and try out new techniques that are different from your niche, because learning from different painting disciplines allows you to merge everything and use that in your niche. So for example, there's some really, really good painters I've met, but if they were to play with more technical paints with like gloss and different finishes, just even a little bit of gloss in some open mouths makes a huge difference.
That's quite interesting. As someone that's painting some Tyranids at the moment, maybe on top of the contrast that I'm going to be using on like tongues and skin, sort of the flesh kind of, especially like the kind of, they've got some quite recessed flesh bits that I'm going to use. I think like a turquoisey green paint. I can't remember which one it is, but I have a plan, and maybe actually putting in a touch of gloss varnish in there, because and I don't mean contrast as in big C contrast TM. I mean contrast on a model, like the contrast between like fleshy, glossy kind of claws and tongues and stuff versus the kind of matte kind of chitin of the kind of insectoid bits. Like that contrast on a model often makes things look really good as well, rather than it just all being quite flat matte colors.
Yeah, absolutely. And it going back to our conversation about being able to see it on a tabletop, that adds so much because it's going to reflect light because it's glossy.
Oh yeah, reflects light, draws the eye, looks striking. Tick tick tick.
Yeah. Oh, another thing I like to do with the gloss is and I did this with the Crute that I painted, is I would, because they were kind of walking through like a muddy, mushy kind of area, is I'll paint the base brown, gloss it, and then I'll put crackle paint over that so that it looks like they've stepped in the crackle paint, and underneath that is the glossy, muddy kind of texture, and it just adds so much.
That's cool. I think there's so many awesome paints and kind of, I'd say paints like products these days. Things like the crackle paint, and textures, tufts, things like that. Like basing a model is no longer a chore because there's so much cool stuff out there that just makes stuff look good, like with such little effort.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the I don't want to call it the technological revolution, but the idea that there are ways to connect with other painters online and to see other people's work is huge in promoting more diversity regarding basing and regarding different materials people learn to use, be somebody else do it. It's a good place to share.
Yeah, absolutely. Something social media is good for a change. We hear a lot of negativity about social media, but actually, watching someone use a different product. Also, sometimes products that aren't designed for Warhammer, when people are just like, I've just found this really cool way of using, I don't know, like people talk about using like Windex, like window cleaner stuff for like cleaning airbrush, and I'm just like, I'm paying horrendous amounts of money for like the fancy Waaagh airbrush cleaner, whereas actually I could just be buying it by the litre for about £1 or something from Tesco's.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stuff like that's really cool. But what about yourself? What are you? You're obviously a commission painter. You're painting a lot of stuff for other people. What about yourself? Do you find time for your own hobby still?
I have them sitting on a shelf looking at me every day. I do. It's I haven't painted for myself in a while, but I definitely think about it every day, and I'm looking forward to starting my next project, which is cool. My boyfriend, for my birthday, kit bashed some awesome grots for me to kind of up my kill team game a little bit, because I'm going to be using them as part of my kill team, and it's I guess I'm just gonna have to post pictures of them, because I can't really like describe how amazing they are. But basically, they're grots standing on giant machines with like little Wii controllers. It's gonna be great.
Amazing. That is. Are they? Obviously, we're big fans of Kill Team on the show. Are you going to be running those as like what Kill Team rules you're going to be using, and are you going to be using grots as things that aren't grots?
So right now I run 20 grot list.
Amazing.
And it drives my boyfriend crazy. So in an attempt to get me to diversify from 20 grots, because I refuse to, specifically for Kill Team, I refuse to use any models that aren't grots. He made me grots on these giant contraptions that are going to be, I think, Rocket Boys. Yeah, I think I'm going to be running them as Rocket Boys. I'd have to double check all the stats and everything, but basically, yeah. So I'm going to have a bunch of grots and then a couple of Rocket Boys. So I think I'm going to go down to, is it running 3 of that? I'd probably be down to, 14 grots and 3, or I think you can only take like 2 rocket. I don't know. I don't remember all the rules, but basically I'm going to run a couple of Rocket Boys and then a bunch of grots. That's going to be my new list. I
think if I could only collect one army, it would be Orks.
You have good taste.
Absolutely, excellent taste. But I think if and I'm my aggressive ADHD stops me from picking an army, and I flip between projects in a kind of hobby butterfly way, which is sometimes fun because it means I can dip my toe in here and there. Sometimes it's actually very frustrating, and I would just quite like to. Absolutely, and that's exactly. I could just pick, paint 5 models and move on. It allows me to like explore a lot of concepts. So even like Space Marines, like like I struggle sometimes with like perfectionism and like making the right, like I'm putting little finger quotes in the air, like making the right decision. So when I'm painting or planning a 40k army, I'm like, well, what color am I going to paint my Space Marines? Are they going to be Blood Angels? Are they going to be Red Scorpions? Are they going to be Sons of Medusa? And because I like lots of different things about those Space Marine chapters, and less so now with 10th edition. This is one of the most exciting things for me about 10th edition is how detachment rules aren't linked to effectively a color scheme and a chapter. So I think what we're going to see is, in like the Space Marine Codex, they're going to have a detachment that's like, on wings of fire, and it's going to be for jump pack armies, and you could have White Scars, Blood Angels, even Salamanders, armies that you wouldn't necessarily normally associate with like a jump pack army, but a Space Marine army is always going to be super flexible, using whatever tactics required. And then you might have like the bike detachment, and that could be used again for like White Scars or Raven Wing, whatever. But you could also have like an Ultramarine bike army, and that's okay as well. And so for someone like myself, it's always worried about like what happens if I want to run a bike army. Well, that means I'm going to have to paint a Raven Wing army. What happens if I want to use a jump pack army? That means I'm going to have to do them as Blood Angels. But actually, that's quite annoying having, loads of different armies all painted the different colors, because you can't then put them all together if you want to run a mixed list. So that's something I struggle with, and it kind of gives me a little bit of like decision inertia, and then I never end up painting stuff. Whereas for Kill Team, it's completely different, and I don't mind having 5 different intercessor kill teams from 5 different chapters, because it means I could just kind of convert them up and paint them differently, and I don't feel then it's like kind of wasted time or wasted money in having similar models, because you could be like, okay, cool, my Templars are going to be a very like close combat one. My Ultramarines, I can do like a Tyrannic War Vets army with loads of conversions, and that can be a very shooty one. But because it's only a handful of models, it doesn't feel like a chore or a waste, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I 100% agree, understand, which is, like that's like what I was talking about the Orks. That was part of my decision-making process for me is just what color do you pick? And I can't imagine having like this really cool army that you want to run and being limited to what colors you're allowed to use if you want them to have like the specific parts that you like.
Yeah, like I want to run all Terminators, so you have to be painted either bone or whatever, like for a Deathwing.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think definitely if I had to choose, if they were like you can only ever pick one Warhammer army, I think it would definitely be Orks, because I think you can Orkify almost like the majority of the Warhammer range. So if you wanted to, and perhaps this is talking about something that's very close to your heart, but if you wanted to do an Astra Militarum army, then you could just make it a looted army crewed by Grots, the Grot Revolution.
Yeah, that is very close to my heart. But also, yes, absolutely. Kit bash potential with Orks is high. I think maybe and this could be controversial, but I think maybe the only other army that could potentially compete with Orks as far as kit bash ability would be Skaven.
Skaven, ooh, in 40k.
In 40k, that's my other personal project right now.
Yeah, and we're talking Gene Stealer Cult kind of Skaven here.
Cheese Stealers, yes. I'm making a kill team for my Cheese Stealers. Going to be running them as Gene Stealers.
Cheese Stealers, that's terrible, but I love it. Yeah, that's cool. I like that. I think are there is it the Hrud, HRUD? I think they're a 40k race that'd be Skaven-esque, that have been talked about in the background. But yeah, the kind of science fiction-y mad scientist rat thing fits within the actual Warhammer fantasy lore or Age of Sigmar lore, but it also fits so naturally into 40k, doesn't it?
Yeah. In my head canon, they've just gone so far underground that people forget they exist. Is perfect. Still around 1,000 years later.
Love it. That's cool. With the kind of new edition around the corner, is there anything you're particularly looking forward to? Do you game a lot, or are you more of a painter and hobbyist?
I played lots of games. As far as Games Workshop games, I mostly play Kill Team. I did start with 40k, but the army I wanted to run wasn't very good, so I switched over to Kill Team. But reading the new 10th edition Orc Index has given me hope, and so I might kind of return to 40k here soon.
Awesome. And what was it about the Orc Index that kind of caught your eye?
It's kind of like the dawn of a new era, because Gretchin writes There have been victories for Gretchin rights within this new index, and I'm so excited about it.
So you've written a bit of a Gretchin rights manifesto, haven't you?
I did. I looked through. Yeah, you mentioned that you might want to talk about the index, so I read through it, and I was so inspired that I wrote up sort of a little manifesto for Gretchin rights, because there have been many victories and very few losses regarding the set change for them.
Awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about that then.
All right, so I have my little sheet pulled up here. The victories for the Gretchin. Their strategic acumen is finally being acknowledged. They can now use stratagems, adding a new layer of depth to their contribution to the Waaagh. Objective control. Grots are no longer just cannon fodder, and they each count as 2 for objective control, which I double-checked is just as good as a Space Marine or a real Ork.
That's a true win for Grot kind.
Did you hear that? You can put Grots on an objective marker, or on an objective, and they count as 2. They count as a Space Marine. And also there's no more culture in 10th edition, which is great because that means there are no more elitist Ork clubs that Grots can't be a part of. They're free from the shackles of culture restrictions, and they're not bound by the old ways anymore, which brings a new era of acceptance and inclusivity for Grots all around. We'll see how long it lasts. Let's see what else. Oh, battlefield rules. They're not just assistants anymore. Grots can now reroll shock attack gun dice, heal other power armored Orks, return up to D3 destroyed bodyguard models to the unit, give a squad 5+ invulnerable save for a turn, and heal 1 HP per turn on all trucks. They're integral to the success of the Waaagh now, and they're clearly more than just assistants. They're also for leadership. They're leaders. Many HQ units now have Gretchin in charge with Ork assistants doing the grunt work.
Oh, yeah. So, like, Gazgul Thraka kind of carries this big, heavy armor around and just does the grunt work of the shooting. But we all know Makari is the real leader, right?
Yeah, Makari is responsible for a lot of the good things that happen during the Waaagh. So they activate special important abilities. They make crucial decisions that can turn the tide of the battle. So clearly Gretchin are now the real brains behind Waaagh, and I'm glad it's being acknowledged. Yeah, and I think really one of the main losses, the only loss for Gretchin with this new index that came out, is cover. They have lost their ability to save in cover, which is a blow to their survivability, but they didn't really have that much to begin with, so it's fine. Yeah, so it's really nice. I really like the 10th index. I know some people have been talking about how it's just like, docked a whole lot of points and stuff that Orks had, and it got rid of culture and stuff. But for the Gretchin, it's actually a buff. So I'm excited about that.
I love it, and I love how you've turned a lot of things into Grot propaganda. I think that's very kind of like in-universe accurate as well.
I don't know what you're talking about. It's really the way it's written. Rules is written.
One of the things there that you mentioned was no more cultures, and we talked about that from Space Marine color schemes and all that stuff. But one of the things you said there was like no more elitist clubs. Being a woman in the Warhammer hobby, is that something you felt? Do you feel like you're kind of trying to get into an elitist club? I see some of the women on Instagram that I follow who are hobbyists are posted recently that they get some flack for like posting a picture of them holding a model, whereas like a guy holding a model doesn't get any flack, whereas a woman holding a model, people say like, why do you have to show your face? Is that something that you've experienced as a woman?
So I had a big kind of philosophy like philosophical controversy in my heart regarding this when I was first starting my Instagram, where I didn't want to post pictures of my face because I wanted people to follow my account for the painting and the hobby content, because I kind of feel like, I don't know, it's one of two things. Like I understand what people mean when they say that pretty girls holding a Warhammer miniature have a huge advantage. That post has a huge advantage whether over somebody just holding a miniature or just having a miniature in their post. But if your paint job is good enough, it shouldn't matter if you're in the photo or not. That's my take on that. And also, I mean, there's nobody saying that you can't take a good photo of yourself, like a sexy photo, like a sexy male photo, holding a miniature. and that wouldn't do well, because I kind of think it would. People just don't do it. So that's my take. Like, if you're just, I don't know, if you think it's because they're a girl and not because they're well taken care of and friendly, then prove it.
Yeah, fair one.
Post some sexy photos and see if they don't do well.
There we go. Watch this stream. Go over to AOTI 40K, and we'll get Steve, Gary, and myself in, posing some sexy grot photos.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I mean, I'm serious. I think they would actually do really well, probably. Yeah, no, but for the most part, like, this hobby has been really accepting. I have not had anybody give me flack for being a girl and for posting photos of my face, or just anything in general. And I think, I don't know, sometimes I instigate debates about, like, female space marines for fun, but it's funny because no one ever actually asks my opinion about it. They just kind of start arguing in the comments amongst each other, and they boost my engagement, but, like, nobody cares about, like, my actual opinion. So I think that's really funny, and I kind of abuse that rule a little bit. But yeah, no, for the most part, the hobby's really accepting. I haven't really had any bad experiences yet.
That's cool. Well, long may that last.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I think that's really positive. Obviously, social media, we've whinged about social media already, but sometimes you see, whether it's people arguing about female space marines or people arguing about or making points about diversity and stuff like that. Like, I think the lens of social media just kind of highlights things at the extreme ends, whereas actually it's really cool to hear that, you've had a really positive experience, especially as someone that's so, like, relatively new, jumping in 2019 to have had such a kind of consistently positive experience is really encouraging.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad I can be encouraging.
Talking of encouraging, what models are going to encourage themselves into your army next from an orc perspective? Do you have any, like, favorite models, or anything that's kind of, like, hanging out in your shopping basket ready to buy soon?
So, I mean, I already have my favorite model, which is the Red Gobbo. However, with the data cards that have just dropped, I really want to, in my shopping cart right now is Zodgrod Wartsnaga, because I think he's the only HQ available to attach to a Gretchin squad, which is amazing, because he believes in the cause, and I think he's really good for the Grot revolution, and he's made, like, the super ultra powered Grots recently, so I think they'll be good to add to collection, especially now they're going to go back into 40K, these new rules. So unfortunately, the Red Gobbo hasn't been put into the 10th edition so far. I think I couldn't find him, so hopefully they get in there.
Yes, the Red Gobbo. Like, I wonder whether there's perhaps you could run him. I suppose you could even run him as Zodgrod Wartsnaga and just put him on a suitably sized base, and then just him be like, yeah, like, you're not necessarily the super runts, the super grots in the lore of Zodgrod. Maybe you're super grots because you've been encouraged to fight by the propaganda of the Red Gobbo. Yeah.
I mean, I definitely could. He's definitely going to be one of the players for sure. It would be cool to run them both. Maybe, or something. I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't want him to take Zodgrog's place.
No, and it's a very cool model as well, Zodgrod.
I would feel bad,
Yeah. Or maybe like commanding a truck or something, or commanding a vehicle.
Oh my god, the vehicles! Oh, the new vehicle rules are insane for I think for specifically me, because they can't. As I understand it, you can just, like, run them into battle, right? But also now you can put Gazkul Thraka on one, because he takes 18 points, and you can put 20 points on a vehicle. I think that's what I read. Anyway, I remember when I was reading through the rules, and I'm very excited to play with them.
I think orc vehicle armies always look very cool. There's a lot of, like, diversity in the model range as well. Even, like, the simple truck, you can make it look so different. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to. I'm going to do, like, a Blood Axe army, or at least a commando heavy army. I don't know whether it's going to be actually from the Blood Axe clan, or maybe I'm going to do it slightly differently. But I definitely would like to do, like, a kind of fully mounted Mad Max-esque orc army, with lots of commandos. I even bought a toy plane from a charity shop that I saw, and I just thought, I think it's like a GI Joe plane or something, and it's huge. It's like a kind of a Hercules transport plane type thing, like a C-130, and I'm definitely going to buy a Dakar jet and just kit bash it and maybe use that. Might not ever get used in a game, but I think it would make for a cool like terrain piece in a kill team game or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. My plan with vehicles now is to make a school bus from Grots.
Like one of those classic American yellow school buses.
Mm-hmm. Yep. With some, orc graffiti or whatever, but
amazing.
Good. Yeah, no. So, but I was thinking about the rules because vehicles can now like Waaagh, move, charge, get destroyed, careen, and drop off units, like
amazing
in one go, and that would be so cool. Because of the careen function. So now I'm gonna have to figure out how to run vehicles because that's new for me.
Yes, I think Grot's amazing. Amazing model range, amazing potential for conversions. You can bring in old classics like from Gorka Morka. You've got the Forge World Grot tanks. There's plenty of stuff there, and as we discussed like this, you could put Grots in any Ork vehicle, and indeed the majority of 40k models in general, and you can just Grotify it. And I love that for them.
Yes.
So I've got 2 questions for you before we start to wrap up, and this is a couple of questions which I really like because I think it shows what's really important to someone as a hobbyist or a gamer. And the questions are as follows. If you could only change one thing about Warhammer and the rest would stay the same forever, what would it be and why? And if you could protect one thing about Warhammer to stay the same forever, whilst the rest of the game or the hobby or whatever would be kind of rewritten from the ground up, what would be that one thing that you'd keep the same and why? So answer those in whichever order you want.
Well, if I could change one thing about Warhammer, Grots would get their own codex.
Love it.
And and if I could protect one thing about Warhammer, and it would have to stay the same forever, minis would get bigger with each release. Because I've noticed that, and I've only been playing, I've only been in the hobby for a few years, but I've noticed they've been getting bigger. So if they just continuously get bigger, how long before we actually have Space Marine armor? And,
Well, I think we've started to see that already with the Joy toy. They came out and they were like, oh, you can buy an Ultramarine Space Marine dude, and then now it's like, and now you can buy pretty much every single model Games Workshop make in a kind of Barbie doll, Ken doll sized thing.
Right, but if they only but that's the whole thing. That's the whole question. If it's only one thing and it has to stay the same forever, I would make it that minis, specifically for the new release, get bigger with each release. So the only way you can continue playing with the new models is to make bigger tables. And eventually
it's just scale up.
And eventually we would get to the live person chess set kind of vibe with Warhammer, which would be cool.
Love it. Very Alice in Wonderland, I feel.
I was going for Harry Potter, but yeah, that works.
Okay, yeah, I could do either. Cool. Well, Valentina, it's been amazing having you on the podcast. Thank you for fighting through the various time zone and my terrible scheduling. It's been great having you on. Have you got any shout outs, any promotion things? Obviously, you've got your commission business, and you mentioned Wicked Dicey and Everwinter and stuff. Like, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. First, thank you for having me. This has been great. I hope I kind of understood the index a little bit. Follow me for updates and stuff on Instagram and TikTok. I post, some of my commission painting there. I'm going to be launching a stream and a subscribe service also on Instagram and TikTok soon, where we can paint together. We can discuss various techniques. I'm going to open it up to people being able to send me photos of their minis, and we'll kind of critique them, and I'll kind of walk them through what to do and what to prepare if you want to, be paint judged at a tournament and things like that. And, also fun stuff with, wine and such. Also, and this is the first place I'm announcing this ever.
An exclusive reveal.
Surprise. I am going to be launching a merch store, not just specifically for my brand, but just in general wargaming. I feel like we don't have enough merch in the hobby. And it's going to be called Gretchin Couture. It drops next week.
Cool. Well, by the time you're listening to this, you'll have a mere few days to go, or a couple of weeks to go. We'll probably get this out sort of late June.
Yeah, the store will be up in July. So, so please come check out Gretchin Couture. We're going to have a lot of fun stuff, a few collections. And and if otherwise, I'll see you guys all at Everwinter for those of you who want to come to Boston and play some cool social deduction games with us and get drunk. Yeah.
It's very tempting to come all the way to Everwinter, to Boston, just to play my first social deduction game. But yeah, when's Everwinter happening? Tell us a little bit about that.
I don't think they have a specific date set yet, but basically the company that's doing it is called Wicked Dicey. They just did Ironweld, and I think Everwinter is scheduled for December 9th and 10th in Boston.
Well, plenty of time to practice your social. My two booms. Was it two booms in a room?
Two rooms and a boom.
Two booms in one room. Seven booms and how many rooms?
Now you're talking like an orc.
Well, on that happy daiquiri note, it's been, as I say, it's been fantastic having you on, and look forward to seeing more orcs on your Instagram feed shortly.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This has been great.
Cool. Cheers.
Yes. Bye.